We'll start off with introductions. So if you guys want to go down the table and say who you are, where you went to school, where you're working right now. So brief introductions.
Cool. My name is Scott Thomas. I am the tech and business reporter, amongst a couple of other hats at austinpost.org. We're a nonprofit news website. We publish Monday through Friday and a lot on the weekends as well. I am a Texas State graduate. I took both Cindy's undergrad web design and graduate web design course, even though I only got my undergrad degree there, so that was pretty cool. I kind of got my own hands wet with web development and web design in college after taking Cindy's class, of course. And while I was at Texas State, I was the editor-in-chief of the campus paper, the University Star, which was a great experience. And then after that, I became the web editor and helped implement a lot of major changes to the University Star's web program, website, and helped it go into a pretty much entirely new direction, which I've always been pretty proud of. And yeah, that's me.
I'm Myra Garcia. I am a web content producer in the evening here. So basically that means I manage statesman.com in the evening. Any breaking news alerts, they come from me. I also help out with social media, so I update at statesman.com and Austin 360 and our Facebook pages. I also manage a few other projects on the side related to our website. But I'm a graduate from Texas State University as well. I got my MA and my BA from there. My BA was in print journalism and political science. My last semester there, my last semester as an undergrad, I took one of Cindy's classes, and I just knew this was, multimedia journalism was something I really wanted to explore more. So that was a big reason for me going straight into my MA, which turned out to be an amazing experience, not just getting to learn more of the research aspect of mass communication, but also enhancing my tech skills and really getting hands-on with some web development. So that was great.
My name is Ryan Murphy, and I'm a data reporter with Texas Tribune. So pretty much I gather data, clean up data, make it look nice, and find ways of utilizing it. I'm also, if you're ever wondering who the guy who maintains the government salary database, that would be me. So I get all the complaints. And some of the other directives. I was a multimedia journalism student at University of Texas. Actually graduated in December. And kind of got started, I always wanted to do web stuff, so that was kind of how I got involved with that. I was the web editor at the Daily Texan for, I guess it was pretty much a year. Had a short stint as the multimedia editor, but went back to web. And kind of got lucky finding Matt Stiles at the Tribune, and went there, and it's been going pretty good so far.
I'm Maggie Cook. I graduated from this tiny liberal arts school in Michigan called Hope College. It has like 3,500 students. I studied psychology with a concentration on neuroscience and cognitive science, and also economics. And I work at Facebook as a user operations analyst. So I look at user problems and figure out how to make better solutions on the site and help them faster and things like that.
All right. So one of the focuses tonight is your college experience and what you've gotten out of that. So if you had to distill your college experience down to the one thing you consider the most important thing you took away from the 4, 6 years, 8 years, however long you spent in college, what would that be?
For me, I guess that would be experience, a lot of doing stuff, whether it was in Cindy's class where we were actually writing code, not just, we talked about, the theory behind a lot of what we did, but we did a lot of practical utilization. We're working at the University Star, shooting video, writing a lot of stories. It was just sheer experience, I think, kind of helped more than any one particular class, and just because you'll never have that kind of time again than in college, where you can just do stuff whatever you want pretty much a lot of the time.
video, edit it, do voiceovers, write blogs, do slideshows all by myself. Like pretty much it was just me sending it to an editor at MTV and saying, here it's done, and them saying, okay, it's cool, send it off, you know. That was pretty much all the direction I got. And it, you know, it was great because I had to learn to do a lot of things on my own, and thankfully, you know, I was taking Cindy's classes at the same time, so a lot of that helped, and it kind of, you know, worked together. So definitely a lot of doing and hands-on.
I mean, for me, I would definitely, I go ahead and say experience as well. But a lot of it for me was finally meeting people that also kind of felt the same way that I did. Because I spent 2 years at UT being just kind of a floater. I didn't know where I wanted to be. I was very happy that I got in, but I came in as a chemical engineer. So I did a little bit of a shift as I got in. I came in as that and then changed the very first day of orientation, went to undeclared. But because I didn't want to do calculus. So, you know, I had spent a lot of time like trying to figure out where I really wanted to be, and finally, kind of just on a whim, had ended up at a journalism orientation, or like not orientation, but like inviting people to come apply. And I heard they were really pitching the multimedia one, and I was like, all right, that's what I want. You know, that sounds great. I always want to do web stuff. That sounds like a good entry, and pretty much just happened that way. Getting involved with the Daily Texan and finding all these other people that cared about things in the same, you know, cared about moving some of this forward, and the Texan was a big part of needing to be a ship that needed to be turned around. That really, I guess, may help me figure out where I wanted to be, and then getting an internship with the Texas Tribune, and getting to meet people there, and getting caught up in, you know, the mission of that place was really, you know, made me comfortable saying, yeah, this is definitely a place I want to be in and want to work with and be a part of.
I would say, like, true to my background, trying a lot of different things and figuring out that every single class that I took was worth something. So, like, I took 2 years of Japanese, and by the time I graduated, I had like 30, high 30, like, extra credits. Like, I had like a whole semester of extra credits at least, and just like I wouldn't trade any of those classes for anything. Like, people are always talking about like they took all these useless classes when they switched majors and stuff, and for me, like, whatever I did, I'd use somehow. And I think like just being able to experiment around and try different things, like, do I speak Japanese now? No, like I never used Japanese, but like that taught me how to learn something that's really complicated. So I think just every experience I had in college, like, I would not trade those years for anything. That was so valuable.
So, when going back to day one, when you showed up at college, what were you expecting to get out of it? What were your expectations going into it?
I guess that's a really good question. Like, freshman Scott's like mental state is completely different from Scott now. Yeah, there are some shared loves there. We both love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and other nerdy shows, but no. Yeah, actually, like what Maggie and like Ryan said, like about not knowing what you wanted to do and just kind of doing a lot of like different stuff. I was thinking like maybe physics or maybe history, you know. So I guess like what I was expecting out of it, honestly, was to kind of put off the real world for 4 years. And in some ways, I think that like any college experience is that to a certain, like whenever you get into it. But I'm really glad that around my junior year, I actually got focus and kind of got an idea of what I wanted to do. And ever since then, I pretty much haven't gone back. I've said like I want to be a journalist. So.
For me, I don't know, I was scared because I'd always had everything like so planned, like, you know, throughout high school and everything. Okay, I have to like, you know, do my homework for this and turn in this project and, you know, just be in everything. And well, sure enough, in college I was in everything. I always overcommitted, but I think that was a good thing too, because it taught me to kind of balance things. But yeah, you know, I remember like the first week I was in college, I went straight to the University Star and filled out an application, and then I went to KTSW and I filled out an application there too. So, you know, I was a features reporter and I had my own radio show by my second semester there. So I'm one of those crazy, super driven think the fear got me there because I was like, I have to make sure I do all these things so I can land where I want to be in the future.
See, that's the difference. My first week of college, I beat Halo. This is kind of an accomplishment.
We're so different.
Well, when I first got there, it was where do I go to let the engineering school know that I would not be joining them? So that was a little bit of a hectic first day to find out how do you decide that you're not going to do it? You don't know what you want to do. But I mean, for me, I guess the first year was I kind of look back at it almost as like a lost year. Like it was a year that I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was completely removed from a rural, I went to a small 3A school. We're barely a 3A school. I graduated 169 people, to now City of Austin, UT. And so it was a lot of just being a little confused and a little bit scared for a good 9 months. But I mean, it was kind of just, I think it was something that I definitely needed to go through. I think everyone goes through it in some way. But it was really just kind of more figuring out who I wanted to be and not necessarily even to the point of what I wanted to do yet. But
my first week of college was really interesting because my dad actually went to the college that I went to, and I knew the college through all of these professors that he was friends with, and they're all really liberal and like interesting and whatever. And come to find out that the student body at Hope College is actually really conservative. So like I thought that I landed in like hell on earth. Like I was like in tears every day, and like all these people are like praying in circles, and I mean not that I have anything against Christianity, but it was just like very conservative environment. And so I'm definitely not conservative, so I was just kind of scared and thinking like I have to get out of here as soon as possible. But really what ended up happening was I ended up speaking up a lot more. So like every single class that I took, I was the one like with the differing opinion, and that was really stressful for a lot of the time, but it was also really rewarding and really like it ended up making me a really genuine person and someone who always voices my opinion. So, but my first week of college, I was expecting to transfer. So.
So, looking back on your careers now, what's something that you got from college to like, I'm glad I went through that, I'm glad I learned this. It's been a one-to-one translation, something that you're doing now as part of your daily grind.
I'm going to maybe cheat my answer because it's so obvious, but it's actually writing. Like I know we're in a group called like Hackers, and so and I've learned things like coding and video, but I feel like at the end of the day what I am is a writer, and I'm glad that through college I just wrote a lot, and amongst I learned video coding, but I just always seem to fall back to that no matter what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm glad that I didn't learn to write in college, obviously, but I think I got closer to writing well in college, and so I think it's just like knowing what you actually are going to do, and it's awesome to have a wide palette of like skills, but I think that you should, especially by the time you're graduating and looking for jobs, know how to sell yourself. And if I had to boil myself down to one thing, it'd be I'm a writer. So
I guess it's really a couple of things. I mean, some of what Scott said, I mean, really learning those fundamental journalism skills in school kind of, I do that every day. If we have a headline error, I have to make sure I fix that, make sure it's spelled correctly, or, make sure our facts and figures are correct. If I see something wrong, then I need to make sure to tell somebody on the copy desk that, something's awry from, my viewpoint on the web. But not only that, but really honing down my HTML skills. I mean, I use that every day. Granted, our content management system is really automated. There's not a lot of coding we have to do. Actually, there's some days I don't even have to touch code. But if there's a problem with something, or if I want a page to look a certain way, we have this thing called dog show. It's an index in our life section, and that page, it can be a little complicated to design, so a lot of that took, some, looking at the back end of stuff and doing some hand coding. And, I remember learning HTML in high much things had changed, you know, and it's just something I definitely use on a daily basis, and it's something that evolves all the time. I mean, especially, you know, you have things like HTML5 kind of being, you know, ready to go, so, and JavaScript too, so.
Yeah, whenever I did HTML in high school, we weren't even allowed to use CSS. It was
I remember.
none of that benefited me later on. But for me, there was really, I guess there's three things. I mean, to just cheat the question. Was one is that I was very lucky to stumble into an internship over one summer where they would pay you to teach you things like web design stuff, which was a pretty good deal. And then they expect you to kind of work with them afterwards. And getting to be around other people who were passionate about doing web-based work was really kind of helped me find that passion that I had for it as well. The second thing would be brute forcing myself through Wanda Cash's 320D class, which I had at one point been in and dropped because I thought I couldn't do it, and then deciding that you know, well, one, I couldn't continue the journalism major unless I did take it, but decided that, you know, this is something that, you know, whatever it was that made me think I couldn't do it before, that was not something that was going to hold me back, and that I was going to do a damn good job in here if it killed me. And
for those of us that don't have the course catalog, what class was this?
This was the intermediate reporting. So it's like,
Okay.
it's the second reporting class, and is commonly referred to as the hellish one, because it's the one that makes you decide if you really want to be in there or not.
I used to teach one of those.
and at first I wasn't so sure if I wanted to be there, but when I decided that this was something that I really was going to be serious about, and to keep going through it, I had to take it. And I was like, I'm going to do a good job in here if it kills me. And I ended up getting an A-, A- switching that they did at UT. But so I was really proud of that. And then part of the third thing is those very, very, very late nights at the Daily Texan, when we were struggling with either the CMS or we had screwed something up before we sent the prints here to the Statesman, and we're very grumpy about that. And just being around those other people that, is kind of going back to what I said before, around those other people that, you know, we were all tired and really grumpy and uncomfortable, but we all cared enough to be there until 3 in the morning when we had class at 8. And just kind of finding that common like connection there, which I now at the Tribune kind of like recognize. I never really understood that between journalists, like that common bond between going through that, and now like that was like my first experience with it, and I really was glad I had it.
This is gonna sound like a cop-out also, but I was gonna say writing, but I don't think it's really writing. I think it's like the amount of thinking that you have to do that goes into writing. So I think the amount of thought that I put into writing in college and like about myself and what my passions were has made me really, really clear about like where I want to go in my job, and clear in interviews about why I'm applying, clear about what my expectations are, and how if things aren't meeting my expectations, or asking questions that are related to like how I'm doing. I think it's made a really clear career path and a really comfortable career path so far for me. So just being able to like express myself well at my job has benefited me a lot. And I think most of that is just the amount of writing and communication I had to do in college.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask? Yeah.
I guess so. I'm on the money side, and so I'm, working to pay the bills, keep the lights on, and in the trades you hear, like even here at the Statesman, where you have voluntary retirements, newsrooms are shrinking. Same in ad departments too. As a student of journalism, when you look, right now you guys are employed. Was there some fear going out into the workforce and, oh my God, I should have gone into accounting or something like that?
Yes.
And just, we have some students here, that journalism students. Can you talk a little bit about how perhaps you went about, landing a gig? Or
Good question.
Totally. No, yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's probably on a lot of people's
Right.
mind. And yeah, I think that we were all there, not that far away. And I wouldn't switch my journalism degree, honestly, for anything. I remember being in college and people would like to come up to you and be like, oh, a journalism degree, you might as well have gotten a, some other seemingly useless degree.
Now I gotta pick another one to throw in the bucket.
Let's do poetry.
Yeah.
Harder, more poetry out of
Yeah.
this.
But then, I kept on hearing that about all these other degrees, and I was like, well, they can't all be useless.
Yeah.
So you're not defined by your degree. I know journalism majors who are developers, or people who work in the journalism industry who never thought about majoring in journalism. They majored in perhaps accounting.
Right.
So I guess my two things there would be, don't be afraid, because you're seriously not defined by your major. Before working at the Austin Post, I worked at a digital communications agency downtown, and it really didn't have anything to do with my major. So you're not defined by your major, and also cast a wide net. I do a lot of covering of the Austin startup community, and if I wasn't where I am right now, I would be looking there. I'd be looking at communications firms. I just think that there's a lot you can do with a communications degree. So I don't think there's a reason for recent grads or soon to be grads to be terrified.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when I wrapped up my MA, I was doing an internship with a online news startup in San Antonio, and they offered me a job afterward. It ended up not working out, and I just wasn't that thrilled about San Antonio. I wanted to be in Austin, so I decided to leave, and I took a part-time job at a publishing company downtown, and I made $10 an hour. I love the people that I worked with and everything, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And not only that, I was $10 an hour won't pay all your bills. So thankfully, I kept networking, and I knew a lot of people here at the Statesman. And, it was just perfect timing, really, when I came here. They had an opening and let me know about it. I did the interview, and thankfully I got the job, and I'm here. But it's all those things, just having a good network, and being able to write really well. And yeah, like Scott said, communication degrees can really take you to many different places. I mean, like I said, I worked for a publishing company for a while, and while I was applying for countless jobs, a lot of them wanted people who could write really well, and these were marketing jobs. They were social media types of jobs. So that skill is really, really important in a lot of sectors, especially here in Austin.
What was that thing? Groupon's hired I think 1 billion writers?
Yeah. Not 1 billion, but a lot.
I think that's the exact number. I think it's 1 billion writers.
Everyone on the planet.
Do a fact checker.
They only pay half, and the other half
They draw straws.
For me, I think deep down somewhere I was terrified, but I had just decided at some point that I was just going to keep doing really cool things as much as I could, and really just kind of hope for the best that it would work out. I mean, and that if I was giving advice on that, and I've had people that have asked me this very question too, this kind of just don't think that you have to be just one aspect of journalism if you're wanting to go into journalism. I think that applies to any profession, but I met people that were in the journalism school at UT, were going through the writing track, this exclusive writing track, and that's all they wanted to do. They didn't want to touch anything else. And a lot of them are the people that are struggling right now because they refuse to learn anything other than that. I know photojournalists that are struggling the same way, that was their thing and that's all they wanted to do, ever. And it's great to be passionate about it, and that's where you definitely can be specialized in, but don't be afraid to branch out. Learn HTML, learn the coding, learn how to build interactives, find tools, keep up with what people are doing now. I mean, that's kind of my story of the Daily Texan was when I walked down there the first time, I felt like I was walking into a time machine because it just felt like 20 years ago down there, because it was such a tradition-built place that everyone was so proud that they didn't want to step away from what their tradition was. So that's my advice on that, is just don't put yourself in a box. So you're only handicapping yourself if you do that.
At the Daily Texan, were they wearing fedoras and like throwing like paper over their shoulder or something?
We did have one.
There's always one.
Got a big scoop, see?
Don't knock the fedora.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add. I mean, all of this is really good advice. I would just say, like, be open. Nothing is ever what you think it is. So don't, like, look at a list of jobs and, like, choose the ones that you think would fit, like, whatever your criteria is. Just look at them all. Like I said, nothing's ever what you think it is. So you're not too good for anything unless it pays, like, $3 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were talking about like learning coding and learning all this stuff, and I think for people that have been out of school a little longer, there are so many avenues for how to go about doing this.
Yeah.
Whether it's like hiring a private tutor through Craigslist, which could be terrible, getting some kind of CD-ROM or some kind of software thing. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because like I did the master's program in journalism at UT, and let's just say like they gloss over multimedia. It's not even a requirement to take the class. I took it my final semester. I was one of 2 grad students. It was all undergrads. They were way past me. I had many breakdowns, but at the end, like I really put together a great package, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Whose class
it was Rosenthal, and it was the journalism master's program at UT was like learn in design and reporting. I mean, it was like when I got out, I was like, you gotta be kidding me! Like none of that mattered at all. So I mean, the reporting obviously, but not so much with the InDesign. So can you guys talk about like maybe your best advice for slightly older people learning some of these things?
Totally. No, yeah, actually, like, I'd like say 2 things. One is like, I think whenever we're talking about like, and then I learned coding, you know, it
wasn't a weak thing for me.
Like, whenever I'm talking with developers, I always feel the need to throw in there, like, you know, I consider myself in a lot of ways a developer, but there's always so much more you can learn. So like, don't feel like you have to like learn it all, because A, you can't, like there's too much to learn, and B, just like, get your hands dirty with like the most basic HTML and CSS, and then you're like, oh crap, I'm actually coding. Like I'm making code and like it's making things on my web browser that I never thought I could do that. So like start off with the really basic stuff, and that'll teach you like what you're saying, like you had to learn to think, you know? That'll teach you to like learn it. That'll teach you how to like think like a coder, like a developer. So that's one. And the other thing is like developers are really kind of open, like it's just like a big open culture. There's all sorts of free resources online.
Yeah.
And if you like to throw away money, you well, like they're like really great teachers, you know. So it's not but like I'm actually like considering taking a Rails class, but there's like so many like resources and guides available online for free. It's like one Google search away.
I agree. You know, there's resources like lynda.com that you can use. You have to pay for it, but BitTorrent.
Some videos.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, just a Google search. You know, learn basic HTML coding. Put that in Google, and you'll be amazed how much will pop up. I follow a lot of people on Twitter that are web developers too, and they always produce like these handy little PDF guides on, you know, how to do this in Photoshop or how to do this for your website using JavaScript. And I love those things because one, they're free and I can just download them and I don't even have to print them. I can just kind of, you know, use them as I'm, you know, trying to work on whatever project. So yeah, you know, the resources are out there, and it's just a matter of, you know, taking a few hours out of your Saturday or whatever day and just getting down and doing it. And it always helps, I think, to have someone to call, you know, if you can ask them, hey, check this out, does this work for you or whatever, or, you know, someone that does know code that can kind of look at, you know, what you're doing in the back end and kind of help you out and steer you in the right direction. So a developer friend is always a good friend.
I think it's good to have a real project too,
Yeah.
because if you're like, I'm going to go learn HTML, but if it's like, I want to make a website about this, and then, oh, I did this, now I want to add this feature. How do I do that? Now I did this, well, I wanted to do like that site. How do I do that? Once you have a real project, then you have like motivation to learn how to make it the way you want it to be.
Yeah, I've always learned when my boss told me he needed something.
I didn't know how to do it.
Figured out.
Figured out how to do it.
When your dinner depends on it.
Yeah.
Like when you're saying about like the guides, like, and I entirely agree with you. But like a lot of guides, they're like, oh yeah, just search up guides. A lot of them are really painful. A lot of them are either one, out of date, or they're so opinionated that, you know, it's kind of like you're like, oh yes, this is the gospel, and then suddenly you talk to someone else and not so much. But I guess I had the glorious freedom of being in college and having a lot of free time. But I was gonna say lynda.com as well. You can go however you want to go about that. But I mean, my advice on that, when I've told people, is that it's $25 a month.
It's not
Yeah. So I mean, what I always say is you can see every single class they have on there. They don't prevent you from seeing what's available, and they'll let you watch the first couple episodes. They break down the classes into like 5 to 10 minute pieces. So my advice that we had an intern at the Tribune that was asking me how to get stuff, and I said, look, just go save up $50, go on the site, and just find all the videos that you would like to watch. And then, because they have no limits on how much you can watch, and that's just 2 months. Find those, pick the ones you want. If you want to make a schedule, I'm not a schedule person like that, but if you want to make a schedule of that sort, and just go through all as much as you can, absorb as much as you can in those 2 months. I used that whenever I was during that internship I was talking about over the summer. I mean, and there were some videos that I watched probably 3 times, like just because I was frustrated that I couldn't get it, but I was determined to do it. And just, I mean, I think I watched the HTML JavaScript one. I think that was one of the ones I did 3 times.
I use lynda.com to keep me up to date with what I'm teaching. So it's a really valuable resource. And if you look at it from, people are always asking me, what's a good book to learn this? I'm like, pay $50 to Lynda instead of buying 2 books, right, yeah.
And it's, I mean, they have people, I mean, there's very respected people that make those videos,
Yeah.
so.
It's lynda.com, no
And they're
endorsement.
pretty interesting. They're not like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
they're not.
boring. And they break them up into chunks too, which I think helps. So you're not there for 3 hours, like, about to go insane.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of add to what they're saying about lynda.com. I actually went to school with Ryan, and I studied urban studies and architecture, and now I'm working as an interactive developer at an ad agency, so it's very, very different. And I did a very similar internship to what Ryan did, kind of in a different department at UT. And like we also had
across the street.
across the street from each other, and we also had access to to lynda.com, and I think just like learning, like seeing what you enjoy about media online, and then seeing how those people do it, and then finding various avenues to learn how to do it. And I guess for Ryan and for various other people, it was through internships, and then also through just kind of personal determination from looking online and seeing what resources are available.
Yeah.
And also
Sponsored by.
And I can just add real quick, like communities, Myra kind of said this, but like I've used everything from like finding these kind of niche forums, whenever I'm doing like Drupal work, to Reddit, like has like subreddits for like you can go to like a subreddit for Drupal or a subreddit for Ruby on Rails. So communities like that are typically, you might be a little intimidated thinking like, I'm going to ask this question, everybody's going to think I'm stupid, but I've never gotten that response, I've asked stupid questions on them too, and they've never been.
Yeah.
And the other good that they do is they do a pretty good job of curating the high quality tutorials too. So that's a good way of also finding both of them on Reddit, through the special subreddits too. I mean, you got read the comments, double check. But usually, I found a lot of good tutorials and stuff on there that you can tell that there's a good consensus that this is a good one to go with.
And in terms of what Myra was saying about having a friend that's a developer, it really changed a lot for me when I started going to the developer meetups, because if I do have a question now, I know a ton of people. I was spending a lot of time beating my head against the computer where I couldn't get something to work, and I'm like, God, I wish I had just had one friend. And I'm like, there's a huge community out there. I should tap into it and start making friends instead of waiting for them to come to me. So Austin on Rails, the Python group, the Django group that they have now, Refresh Austin, even the Social Media Club, there's lots of opportunities to meet people who know things that you don't know.
Yeah, and as I've started doing dev a long time ago, and the best way I found to learn is just do it.
Yep.
Just do it, and you make a ton of mistakes, and that's cool because you learn a ton by making those mistakes. I know I have friends that call me up, Morel, I can't get something to work. I'm like, you know what? Forgot the quote. Just the quote for the semicolons will get me every time.
I know a lot of people who can relate to that. I've been in my classes. So.
I do say, like, with the HTML, I learned it through Cindy's class, and I just learned basic HTML. That's what she was teaching in the class. And within, I think it was a week after we learned basic, I had already done an entire website. And it was just by sitting at home, messing on the computer around with it, and looking on lynda.com. We've given them a lot of credit tonight. But that's basically, I just learned by doing, playing around. And I actually came up, we had to do a really big project in our class, which was create a marketing plan for a business. And so me and my friend David had come up with collegebarhelper.com. So the way that we got it going was me doing the coding for it and actually creating the website. And by having a website to actually create it for, it actually helped me learn how to do the coding really well and quickly, because we were trying to get it up by the end of the semester.
And I have to emphasize, this was not the web design class. This was like 1.5 hour of HTML in the social media class, and she took it and ran with it. So it's not as extensive as the classes that some of these guys took that were full semesters of web design. So way to go, Melissa.
Yeah, 2 questions right here, I think.
Kind of going back in terms of like going into the job market and stuff like that. I'm curious, and you're talking about finding compatriots, communities of practice, within your on the campus and such like that. But what's striking me is you're all talking about your college years is, for me it was NUM and the draft, and we were in the streets, right? Civil rights, all that sort of. So I'm not trying to throw in like social thing on this, but what was it? What in terms of mentors or conferences? I mean, sort of external kind of activities that impacted, reached into what you were doing. That, I mean, in terms of the whole startup entrepreneurship evolution period that was going on has driven so much of what is going on.
That's a great question. I have, I guess, kind of a twofold answer. One was whenever I was editor-in-chief, it was over Christmas break, actually, whenever I was editor-in-chief, and there was a kind of conference at Texas State. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was entirely digitally focused. Like, we had statesman people, San Antonio Trustee. It was actually people from all over. It was a fairly wide.
It's like a one-shot symposium that we brought in a bunch of different professionals, not Mass Comm Week, but yeah, you were at that one.
Yeah. It was like a one-shot symposium, and it was like right whenever the Depression hit, right whenever newspaper circulations were like plummeting, and it was a terrifying conference. I mean, I honestly don't think I've ever been that scared in my entire life, and so that was probably that was one moment. And that's the moment that kind of I just honestly just kind of thought, well, yeah, I'm in journalism. I've got this great gig as editor-in-chief. I'm going to graduate from here and get a job at the Dallas Morning News or something, And that was the conference. I was like, that might not happen. And so that was my terrifying conference. Yeah. And then the first time, I got into Cindy's class and I started to get really, hooked into this and work into it. The other one was ISOJ, and that was such an inspiring or the International Symposium of Online Journalism. That was such a everyone there was super optimistic, and we were talking about cool ways to do journalism, new ways to do journalism. And so that was super optimistic. So the first one, the terrifying one, did put me in the right direction. It kind of knocked the naivete from my head. And then the second conference, made filled me with hope and optimism that I still have about our industry. So.
Well, I was going to ask too about experiences. I'm glad you asked that, because the South by Southwest project that we do is not only you're attending, but you're participating in it. And Myra and Scott both did that. So if you want to add that in there too.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. The fact that you brought up the Fear of God conference, I probably forgot about that one on purpose.
So glad we did that one.
So you brought it up. No, but yeah, South by Southwest, that project was really, really great. I hadn't been to South by Southwest prior to Cindy arranging this whole project, which basically we started a blog and we covered South by Southwest. Going to panels, we did coverage beforehand, of course, and it was just very hands-on. It was all us, you know, this was our grade. So, you know, we had that on the line. But, you know, actually going to the conference and experiencing it, it was just like, it was mind-blowing to me because just so many intelligent people in the room with you and answering these great questions. No one's asking, what's Twitter, like, you know, what's the hashtag? So, you know, things like that. You know, it's just like, it was very, very altering, you know, and that sounds dramatic, but it really was. You know, it taught me that there are jobs out there. Yes, you know, the recession had hit and everything, and that was, you know, being someone who had to pay for graduate school and still has lots of debt. You know, I think it gave me a lot of optimism. So that was great, and you know, just a really supportive family who, you know, they still don't quite know what I do, but they know I'm doing what I love. So.
I think the South by Southwest project gives what Ryan said earlier about these are my people, I found a place. And a lot of students go to that, maybe they're a little overwhelmed at first, but over the course of the conference, they're like, wow, there's a whole bunch more people who care about the stuff that we've been talking about in class.
Yeah.
There's like 20,000 people who really get this stuff. And then I have to say Myra is a great example of somebody going through this project because she did the project as a student and then she had her own panel this year that was accepted.
That was
so
fun.
she's like a fully ingrained member of the community once you have a panel accepted. Yeah, that's what we want to see, and that was a result that I didn't even anticipate, that sort of full circle, having students become part of the South by Southwest community in terms of being on panels as well as proposing them and getting them accepted. So I hope we have a lot more of that as we go on.
I mean, for me, whenever, like I said, I came to journalism, I guess it was probably the break between my sophomore and junior year. So I was kind of walking in when a lot of people were walking out of that major. And I mean, that was a very awkward conversation with my parents whenever I did that. I was really curious on why I decided to do that. But I mean, for me, I guess in terms of what you're saying, like mentors or people that I had ran into, I mean, for me, it was always, I wasn't wanting to do it because I wanted to be the best writer ever kind of thing. I mean, a lot of it for me was the kind of noble idea of you're doing good work for people, you know, for the public. And I, you know, was skeptical of that, but like, I mean, one person I know is, there's two people in particular that really, like, reassured me that this was not a mistake and that there was a good idea to be in this profession. And one was Doug Warren, who's the advisor at the Daily Texan. I mean, he's been in the business for years and used to be at the Boston Globe, and it was kind of just an eye-opening experience to meet him and to talk with him. And you know, he recognized that, you know, things were pretty bad, but it wasn't the end of the world. You know, there was definitely need for people who were willing to step out, you know, to try new things and to get involved. And for me, the second one would, I mean, be Matt Stiles at the Tribune. Well, not there anymore, but now with NPR. But meeting him and like finding, I mean, that was probably, I guess that was my last spring semester I had actually. So it was last year, and that was in one of the multimedia courses that I was in, and just kind of seeing what he did with like the data stuff and seeing, you know how he made it a point of like always, it wasn't just about saying the shocking thing. It was about, you know, putting out information that was relevant and people deserve to know. And just getting to spend time with him and like, you know, learn about how he went through the business and stuff like that was really made me realize, you know, there is definitely more to this than just, you know, saying I'm a journalist, kind of like that. So that's all I got for that. But
I don't really have like one experience, but I know about myself that I'm awesome at stuff that I'm passionate about, and I completely suck at stuff that I'm not passionate about. Like, if I'm not interested in something, it's just like, I can't do it, I suck at it. So like, if I had a job that I wasn't interested in, I probably would do really poorly at the job. So I think as soon as I discovered that there was this culture that was built on using people for their strengths, I really, really got fascinated with that. So I think probably the first company that really sticks out in my mind is Google. When I heard about kind of culture at Google, where it's a strengths-based company and people, you know, are allowed to come in whenever they want, and there's this like freedom as long as you do your job well. I think that sort of like basic trust in their employees and people really following their passions really stuck out to me, and I got hooked on that. And there was like no going back. That was sometime like late high school.
Can you guys say good things about Google? Or-
Yeah. I use Google every day.
She's not on the search team. You have a question.
Yeah, considering that we're all involved in a very quickly evolving field, to say the least, and academia is supposedly on that edge, and y'all are all recent entering into the field and work for a diverse set of companies. I don't mean to get anybody in trouble with this question, so I'll frame it nicely. Are there trends that either surprised you by being ahead of what you expected in the field or industry, or are there trends that are lacking and lagging behind because of maybe generational divides or simply corporate structures in the field, whether that be the uses of social media, uses of geotagging? I know that's kind of confining, but that's more my expertise. So.
That's a great question. And like, yeah, academia is like a lot of the times I feel like they can do like good, academic research into what is like the cutting edge. But honestly, I feel like, and I think that most people who are kind of entrenched in academia will agree with me here. But there's a lot of friction to change in academia, and like you gotta there's just like I said, like a lot of friction to change. So just kind of going back to what you're saying about academia being on the cutting edge, it can be, but a lot of times I don't think it is as much as it should be. And going into the field, my last job at WCCG, which is this digital communications firm, I was almost shocked, like how they were like on the cutting edge and then some. I almost wanted to say, like, shouldn't we slow down sometimes, guys? Like like everybody was using Scavenger one day, and then everybody was like they were just. And it's good to try stuff out, but I don't think there was almost enough questioning of like, well, should we be trying this out? Does this actually have a use, or is it just kind of a dumb fad,
Yeah.
And so do experiment, because a lot of this stuff is free, so why not? But I think maybe a lot of it's kind of fueled by just like the urge to say like, oh, I was on Twitter, in 2007 before all you guys. I was on it before this stone,
It seems like a pendulum, though, as far as industry. They were so resistant to social media and these new technologies for so long, and now it's swung back by everyone that wants everything, and they're not questioning it.
Just take a look at it, and if you think it looks dumb, maybe give it a try. And if you just don't like it, it's not the end of the world. It's social media.
I think that's one thing that really attracted me to, come work at the state, aside from the fact that they offered me a job, is that, they do give us a lot of freedom to kind of explore what's out there in terms of social media and see if it's something that would be useful for us. So, and I know every newsroom is not like that. I interned at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram in 2008, and I think there were maybe like 2-3 people with Twitter accounts, and I was there when they laid off a lot of people too. That was kind of a scary experience as well. But when you saw the people that were let go, you knew why, because they didn't understand the web, or they weren't as willing to embrace just technology and as it evolved. So. There's a lot of people in the newsroom here who are really savvy, and there's a lot of people who are not. But it really depends on where their strengths lie. And for the most part, most people here do get it, and they know it's something that's important that they have to continue to use. So, in terms of academia, I mean, it really depended. From professor to professor, there were some who were really against, changing, the routine of, write a story, learn how to write a lead in a nut graph, and, that whole thing. But, luckily, we had professors like Cindy and, others who came on board with the idea as well. And I think really towards the last maybe year and a half of my undergraduate degree there, I really started to see that change, because I would definitely say when I started college there was none of that. There wasn't people, really
think for me in that is like you just always need to be willing to take a step back. Kind of like you were saying about like everyone just freaking out about everything. I mean, I saw there was an article today in one of the journalism blogs, kind of like saying like 4 ways you can use Instagram for like sharing journalism stuff. And it's like, you guys do know you've been able to put photos online for a while.
Yeah.
It doesn't require Instagram to make that possible.
Spoken like a true Android user.
there might be some ill feelings from that.
Let's just go root our androids without him.
But I mean, it's just you'll see a lot of people that every time something new comes out, everyone just rushes over there and tries to capitalize on it. I mean, I think for me, it's just always remember, one, if you keep an eye on stuff like this, and I'm kind of a technology nerd anyway, so I always keep up with stuff with it. But you see, a lot of it's not. They're all just kind of pivoting on the same idea. I mean, there's not necessarily always something that's groundbreaking that's coming out every week that's going to change the face of journalism. It's kind of like recognizing that things like Twitter, they're not. It's a tool. It's just another tool to use. When you're with, even in journalism with Facebook, it's a tool. It's a tool of reaching out. It's not. Don't build everything on it as like that'd be your entire strategy. You recognize that it's the same tool as anything else you've been using for the past 10, 20 years.
That's just because it's like a tool for reaching out, but also people reaching to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second. But yeah, man, that's really like I said with that. Just be willing to just kind of think about, do we really need this, or do we already have it, or do we?
Yeah.
Really, what's more? Is it are we using it because it's something that's adding value, or are we using it because we want to say that we're using it?
So Facebook really has trouble adapting new technologies. No, I would say, I mean, I guess like the fear in my space would be like becoming too corporate or slow or going too fast, things like that. And I mean, people emphasize like calling out that kind of bullshit, and like I do it all. I mean, not all the time, but like if there's something, if I'm invited to a meeting, it's like, why am I going to this meeting? Like if I don't need to go, I just don't go. I mean, it's like you can't let that stuff seep in. And I mean, I think the part that's the struggle is like always staying on top of that and really being conscientious of it. You can't like just expect it not to happen, because actually, interestingly enough, I think the people that are the newest graduates have those tendencies the most, because they've never been in that environment before, and so they just sort of like do what they think might be appropriate, which just sounds corporate-y, and it's like, no, like this is bullshit. So yeah, I mean, you just have to work hard at like pushing back on that stuff, but at least where I am, it's accepted. So
I read a blog post today by Kathy Sierra, who used to blog a lot. She doesn't blog that much anymore. She's one of my favorite people that I've seen at South by Southwest. And the whole point of the blog post was, when you make a new social network, it shouldn't be about what your cool feature is. We've got badges, we've got this, we've got all these kind of things. It's how you make the user feel, like the value you're giving the user. And so at the end of it, there was like a little graphic that said, how do you want your users to feel? My badges are so badass, versus the person that was like, I am such a badass. Like, so you want them to take responsibility for it. You want them to feel good. She's really big on creating passionate users, used to be her thing. And so if you can think about things that way, as opposed to just every little feature that comes along, every little thing, and think not just how you can use the tools or the techniques, but how other people might use them. Because sometimes I'll look at something and I'm like, that is so stupid. But how might somebody else use it? Or why is everybody talking about it? What have I missed here? And so, just constantly thinking through those questions.
It just seems to be a shift from needing to justify the existence of a technology to now to defend the technology's usefulness.
And it doesn't have to be that, but it should be open-minded about, like, it's not all about me. It's about the people that are potentially using it.
And something I was going to add to that, I mean, really what it comes down to is we need to be where, and when I say we, the media industry, need to be where those communities are, and Facebook and Twitter and like Foursquare would be one of those growing communities, but that's where the big communities are, and that's where people get their information. So that's where we need to provide it for them, because they expect it there now.
From a user's perspective, one of the things, let's say Google, the G word here, one of the things that I love about Google is that they keep it simple. you know, if you've been to those sites where it's like you gotta, you know, the Facebook like button, then you gotta, you know, all these buttons, and then you got the little the Facebook friends and the Twitter friends, and it's like just overkill because the story is like a paragraph, you know, or it's like, and it's,
Yeah.
I really only want the content. I mean, at some point, it's like, why are we using all this stuff? It slows down the site, it makes it extremely complicated, it's not user-friendly, and yeah, I get it, you know, I might want to retweet it, but, you know, if it's a crappy story, then you're gonna get some bad comments on it. At what point do you think, okay, this is just overkill, no more buttons, we don't need to repost this any more times?
That's, actually, I think like a pretty, I guess, complicated, like, or, you know, it's just like a tough question to answer because I look at the Huffington Post and they got crap everywhere. But they get,
You're like looking for the piece that's actually the article.
Yeah, like they got crap everywhere, but I mean they get a lot of hits and like you know, sometimes maybe we need to acknowledge a lot of people like crap, you know. It's the same.
But it's like you're in Times Square. I mean, stuff like I mean, this is like old school, like maybe the '90s, like GeoCity. Like, you know, if you're following stuff, gonna start following your mouse again. You know, it's like we don't want that. It's like we just want good content. You know,
Times Square attracts a lot of people. Though.
I guess if I had one thing insightful to say, I'd steal it from a gentleman who presented at Austin on Rails. He said, like, try and make, and I forget his name, so sorry, guy out there somewhere. He said, like, good design is like a switchblade knife. You know, it's got a lot of stuff that you can pull out, but it's inherently simple. And he used Twitter as an example. You do a lot on Twitter, you know? Like, you not only send out tweets, you retweet, you @reply, you have direct messages, you have lists, like, if you saw all that just from looking at the user experience right away, then you would probably like mind meld and never look at Twitter again. So I guess, I mean, if I had one insightful thing to say, it'd be like try and design like a switchblade knife.
I think it helps that a lot of sites are starting to have URL shorteners for their stories. Like they'll have the bit.ly there ready for you to go instead of, you know, say the tweet button or whatever. So I don't know, that's just the change I've seen recently. That seems to be helpful.
I think it's going to be difficult as that marketplace is so fractured. I mean, once Facebook takes it all over, then it might be a little easier. But for now, I mean, as the guy who has to put in every new button for every new service that comes along, thank you Google OnePlus, that I need on my to-do list to add to, dig, stumble upon, Twitter, you know. It's going to be fractured for a while, but at some point that'll chill out, or we'll find a better way, some service that hits them all.
Yeah.
People are talking about a social media bubble, so some of these companies might not be around.
Yeah.
Not Facebook, but all the rest of them. Now, do you have a thought on this stuff?
I think I've had that same frustration. I'm more on the user perspective on that. Like, I hate it, especially when I go to an article and it's the same size as an advertisement. Like, that pisses me off. Because I'm like, okay, like, waste of time. I could have probably, like, posted this on someone's wall. It's like the same size. Yeah, I mean, I think, like, sites that I've seen do it well have those buttons at the very bottom of the articles. The advertisements are minimal, or like they don't put them on the side. I just think of like where they are visually. Like, I don't mind if there's like a little lineup of buttons at the bottom of an article, but if they're small and simple and iconic instead of like all this crap everywhere. But yeah, that's and I hate flashing things with a passion.
Blink tag. To come back to something that we sort of skated around earlier, a lot of people in the profession of journalism are looking to academia to come up with the saving grace. As someone who has not spent the better part of the last decade in that space, that's odd to me. I'm coming from the startup space, where you have companies like Facebook figuring out hard scaling problems instead of looking to CS departments to say, how do we scale? In the media space, that seems to be different. What are your takes on that? Do you think that journalists are, and the media in general are looking to the right place, or should they be trying to figure out how to innovate themselves?
I completely agree with you. I mean, like I said, I cover a lot of startups, and like I admire their ingenuity and like their resourcefulness, and I think that yeah, like media companies could learn a lot from internet-based startups. I think that academia has a lot to offer, you know, training the next generation, obviously, but you know, like that only goes so far, and it's yeah, like the media's problem to solve, and I think kind of I might be poking at a scab here, but I think that two of the major problems that the media hasn't quite figured out yet is scale, like running an online operation at the scale that media operations currently run on, and it's kind of in a similar vein, running a media operation with like the page views and like the experience that readers currently get from reading the news online, and that's why they tend to cling to the hard copy so much.
Yeah, I would agree on the, you know, taking notes from the startup community. But when it comes to, you know, how do we make money, you know, using the web, it's one of those things where, yeah, you kind of have to try it and see if it works, and if it doesn't, move on to the next thing. I think a big question that comes up a lot is, you know, why wasn't the media company able to come up with, you know, something like Groupon? Why did Groupon make Groupon instead of, you know, Cox Media Group coming up with that idea? Granted, we have our own branded version of that, Deal Swarm, name drop. You know, but it's hard to tell. I mean, I just don't think that mentality is there, unfortunately. I think a lot of people are afraid to do things, or because in some cases their job does depend on it, and that's a little unfortunate. But I mean, I guess it's a money issue, and you know, that mentality definitely needs to come into the fray, I think.
I was referring to something. I mean, what I've heard embedded in that is the dynamic in terms of like the entrepreneurship community in their branding. I mean, this is our struggle: is journalism as infotainment or as the fifth estate. I mean, journalism was never conceptually in a free society a profit center. So I mean, it's the idea that it's supposed to be. Somehow we've got to finagle it so that it is. I mean, I don't have an answer here, but it's, to me, it's a conundrum of how does this survive?
It has survived.
Yeah.
People have had to pay for the bills for the last 150 years. That's not something that's new. So, but
I know as the sellers, I honestly have this conversation with folks all the time. Like, we just launched Austin 360 Radio, so you can listen to radio online. And I said, damn it, why didn't they just call it like 360 Radio? Just because it's Austin 360 Radio means the dude in Maine, he may not listen to it because that's Austin. You know, a startup would say, hey, this be like, what is it, Spotify? Or
yeah, Spotify's the English or the
British one, right?
Yeah.
There's no like, oh, here's like BritishMusic.com. It's like, you know, because we're local media, we think locally, we think too small. Facebook is not, you know, Austin Facebook is just Facebook. It's global. Google is global. All these, you know, large organizations. The Huffington Post is global, and we think locally, I think, and that prevents us from generating, you know, $8 billion in value, is because there's not $8 billion in Austin. I mean,
yeah.
I would love it
back to
if dealing $8 billion.
But getting back to that point, though, I mean, as an institution, journalism, if you don't know, if you're not able to cover City Hall, I mean, what's the point of knowing about the global trends? I mean, that's,
Yeah.
it's like, what, this, as a, I'm saying, I was a professional organizer for
Right.
27 years. And, I mean, I learned a lot from the journalists of like, due diligence, do your homework, really, you know, dig, investigate.
But
And
sadly,
you gotta
the
be able to
jobs
write.
the jobs for someone to be a city hall reporter versus the amount of jobs there are to do the things that everyone else here is doing. So it's, I think in academia, and I ran into this like, after being at UT and then taking on the Austin Post, I was kind of trying to get my former professors and their students involved in the Post, since we're mostly open source. We have a small staff, but we allow anyone to contribute to the site. And I was trying to get them to get students to do projects for us so that we could get better content. And there was a lot of resistance because the UC school has their own online journalism, like the journalism school's own little newspaper online, and they were not sure if they wanted to get out of, they didn't want their students to write for something else. And so eventually I got so frustrated with the back and forth, like maybe we'll let them do it, maybe not. I'm like, they can do it if they want, they just need to know we exist. So I sent an email to the students and said, if you want to get clips that are published outside of the university, check out the Post. And I mean, the professors that used to like be my favorite people just turned on me. They were like, I can't believe you came to our students without coming to us first. You caused a big ripple, like, you know, because I basically said sometimes stuff that you write in class doesn't get published, and it's frustrating. I know what it feels like. You work so hard on the story, and then it sits there, you get an A, and who cares? I was like, take that story, send it to the Austin Post, and boom, you've got a clip to send to grad school or a clip to send to an internship. And they were like, don't say that stuff we do in our classroom is worthless. I was like, sometimes it is. You know? It's sad, but they're not learning. A lot of these students need other things. So I think there's such a tension with professors who've only done print, and they feel like that is be all end all. Those are the skills you have to learn, and those things are really great to learn as a basis, but I think they're insecure because they're realizing that they don't know the things to teach these kids to go out and get a job. I mean, they're teaching us to get a job at the Washington Post, and there is no job at the Washington Post to cover. City. You know, the people in Austin who've been covering City Hall have been doing it for so long. Like in cities like Austin, you kind of have to like wait for someone to die before you can get the job. I mean, it's like covering the Capitol or whatever. It's the same reporters in Austin circulating from the Tribune to the Statesman to the AP to the, it's like the same 10 people. So it's sad that we all should learn how to cover City Hall, but I mean, only a few people get to ever do it. So.
And sorry if I'm kind of juking the conversation. I'll make this brief. I do feel like there's also just like a lot of like knowledge out there about city politics that we don't have to cover. We have to like bring in, you know? Andy Carvin is covering the Middle East with his Twitter account. It's amazing. It's amazing the work the man does. Like I have a lot of admiration for if you don't have, or like if you don't follow A. Carvin on Twitter, like do it right now at this very second. Like so like seriously. He's my primary source for Middle Eastern news, and like he's one guy who does all this work on Twitter, and so I feel like if we can pull stuff in, we don't need to do quite as much like covering.
But don't you see that as a fall in investigative journalism? A fall in by verifying your sources. If you're taking people's word, if you have one person covering a downtown area and they mess up their fact and they're giving 200 coverage centers the information, it can't be checked because they're not spending the time.
Well,
How is that different than any other, like?
I mean, I feel like
office
once you're using,
desk?
say, like AP's feeding the stories and everything, and you're just accepting news as fact, but you're not actually investigating it yourself or one of your reporters, it's a fall in standards.
But Andy Carvin is a journalist.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
is.
and people have to come up with their own levels of credibility assessment. It's not just some random dude that's covering it. Although sometimes that happens.
And I think that if that's something that's a problem, someone's going to eventually challenge you on that.
Oh,
Right.
I mean, it's not like you're just going to sit there and no one ever will question you. If you're failing in that job, there's going to be competition.
yeah, when 200 million people are like reading something you say, you're gonna know pretty quick if it's wrong.
Yeah, Ushahidi dealt with that because that was the thing. They were having a credibility issue, and so they developed, what is it, Clear River or something? Is that, what was it?
I can't remember the name.
But you know, it was like, okay, all you people that are like nearby, is this legit? What this somebody's put on here? So it was a validation. Get multiple sources on something.
Yeah, and Carvin does a lot of fact checking too, and by using other people as a way to verify sources. And what he does is pretty much at the end of every day, is he'll make store files of whatever topic he covered for that day, and store find. Is it
.com.
Storyfly.com. Yeah, he aggregates his tweets that way and kind of, goes through the timeline of what happened, puts input in there. So.
I think systems do regulate themselves in a lot of ways. If you actually go back to Reddit, if you look at the front page, a lot of the times it's like, OMG, this corporation did this most evil, heinous thing in the whole world. They killed puppies for the fun of it. And then, you'll see the next day on the front page, it'll be like, actually, turns out that corporation didn't kill those puppies. And they found them all homes. Systems do, I think, kind of regulate themselves in a lot of ways, especially whenever it comes to what kind of leading up. Yes. So,
and I think somehow we have to find a way, if we're going to continue to cover City Hall, somebody's got to pay for the paper and the ink, or the servers, bandwidth, whatever it is. And it's like, who's going to be that person? I mean, it'll be tough for me, honestly, to sell ads on, perhaps city council meeting pages. I mean, it's like, man, that's a tough sell to a furniture store.
But has that always been though?
Yeah.
Has that always been there's a reason
Yeah.
why.
That's what I'm saying. Those areas have always been understood had to be subsidized. I mean, they were not going to pay for themselves.
Right.
But it was critical. I mean, that's it's an underpinning of. I don't know if it's.
Well, back to Travis's
Sorry.
original comment, the thing that informs how I think about journalism more than anything, and I come at it from a non-traditional journalism background, is my interest in the tech community. It's attending South by Southwest, reading Wired, reading Fast Company, following every tweet and blog that's about technology, because that is how we're delivering the information now. That's the platform that we're using. And a lot of people discussed the convergence efforts of, say, the late 90s, the early 2000s, where it was like TV stations and newspapers got together and they failed miserably. Even academic programs, we'll just put our broadcast program and our journalism program together and we're good. But they didn't think about the web part of it. They didn't really understand that there was this thing called the web that changed the business model, that changed the scale, that changed the interaction. There was all these different features of the web. And so maybe if a company like Cox partnered with a startup like Facebook instead of trying to partner with a TV station, but that's what they knew. They looked in their backyard instead of looking beyond their backyard. So that's why I think convergence efforts failed, and why I think it's a really good idea to really focus on the tech community, whether it's startup or not. I mean, it could be some company like Facebook that's large and it's not a startup anymore, but they're adding features and they're doing interesting things and they're delivering news. I mean, it's called a news feed for a reason. And it's changing the idea of what we think about as news. And so paying attention to that puts you on the forefront of what's going to happen in journalism. And so it's just a philosophy that I've had since I've been teaching.
So to wrap this up, knowing what you know now, where you're at, and where you if somebody came to you that is going into their senior year of high school, would you recommend the route you took to get to the place you're at now, or would you tell them to go do something different? And that could be a different degree. It could be spend 4 years in the industry doing stuff. But would you say this is the route you should go?
I would tell him or her. I would say, if you want to do journalism, do journalism. Get a wide palette of skills, but know what you do. Like I said earlier, I'm a writer. I do video, whatever, but I'm a writer. So know what you do. Branch, use that as like the trunk of the tree. Branch outside that, and just keep up your profile, blogging, Twitter. I think that blogging has probably been one of the best things that I've done for my career. So if you're going to be a writer, write. If you're going to be a photographer, shoot photos. The tools are there, and there's nothing standing in your way these days. There's no barrier of entry, and there's no gatekeepers.
I think if someone's really passionate about it, then I definitely encourage them to go this route. But at the same time, with the warning that it's not the easiest route, that it's definitely challenging. But if you're interested in that challenge, then this is totally the path for you. And I think that's why I love this industry so much. There's always, there's been changes and, in all sorts of directions. So that's what I've always found appealing about it. And break you. I mean, you may not be cut out for it, and that's the truth. You know, not everybody's a writer, unfortunately, or you know, not everybody can handle the different skill sets that it takes to do this job. And but and that's another appeal of it for me too. Is like I feel like I have my hands in so many different things. I can do so much with my background. That's what I love about it.
For me, no, probably not. Probably wouldn't say do it then. I mean, there was time that like my first freshman year and even part of sophomore year that was kind of, I really was just kind of floating. And it wasn't, I guess the advice that I would give, and might be the cheesy advice, but really spend the time figuring out what you like doing. Like what makes you happy with it. Like I had so many, and it's like not anyone in particular, but just so many people that always kind of had that advice that was like, oh, this is the way you should do it. This is what you should do this for a little bit of time, and then look for an internship and do it like that. And that it did. I mean, it worked. I did do that in some shape, way, or form. That worked out. But just go out there and find out what you like doing. And that's the biggest thing. You don't want to look back 30, 40 years later and go, I really don't wish I would have done that. Like you're gonna make some mistakes, but just figure out what it is that makes you happy. Go for that. It's really worth it to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when I think about like the first 2 years of college, I'd probably tell myself to like be anxious a lot less and not worry so much about like getting an A and everything. But I think that probably was functional then, and I'm glad that I went through college that way because afterwards I didn't have to worry about like I didn't try hard enough, and like now I don't know, I didn't experience enough. Like I really made the most of that experience. So, yeah, I mean, the same thing you said, like figure out what makes you happy and just do that. Because like you only get one chance to live your life, so you don't want to look back and be like, damn it, should have been an accountant.
And on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in both the audience questions and the panelists.
Yeah, thanks again for coming. The next meeting is July 5th at the Texas Tribune, and there'll be more details about that. There's still some snacks left if you guys want to have some on the way out. Thanks again.